Hi, this is a tropical update for Thursday, September 14th. The opinions in this video are mine alone and always consult with the National Hurricane Center for official forecasting details. Well, we are currently keeping an eye now on what is currently Tropical Storm Jose. Was a hurricane earlier today and over the last few days, but it's been downgraded briefly into a tropical storm, but will eventually re-strengthen into a hurricane as the trough that's been shearing it off to its east begins to lift on out to the northeast, and the environment where Jose is begins to become a little bit more favorable. So a little bit closer in on Jose again, you can see dry air with the system has really been the main kicker with this thing from getting better organized from where it was earlier in its life. Again, you can kind of see the shear with the trough on the eastern side, as well as the dry air that's been impeding this thing, and you kind of see that with the thunderstorms dying out as they move west out of the center of circulation. A little bit microwave imagery passed from this morning. Again, still shows that dry air, really not a lot of thunderstorms off to the north and west side of the circulation. So all the storms, again, with that northerly shear and pushing all the storms off to the southern side of the circulation center right here. Again, as we go forward in time, the shear environment will lessen, so this thing will get a little bit more favorable and will eventually re-strengthen back into a hurricane. Just how strong of a hurricane, that's going to be the main question as we go forward in time. But we'll go into that a little bit more detail as we go later on in the video. So the main player and the main question has been, where on earth is Jose going to go? And that's been the main forecast that everybody's been playing around with for the last many days now, even when it was down over north of Puerto Rico and even a few days ago. So the models have been kind of now agreeing on the solution on this, although the trend is the main key, and I'll show you that in a little bit. So as we go forward in time, the main thing to take away from this is you got a high pressure system that's over the Central Atlantic right now, going to be the main steering flow for Jose. That will eventually kick this thing starting northward as we go forward in time. So you can see this is the initialization for Saturday, and you may want to also keep an eye on this trough that's also in the west coast of the United States and see what that's going to do in relationship to this high pressure system. So this is the current GFS forecast for Saturday. As we go forward in time, you can see that really strong trough that was in the west kind of flatlines and gets stuck way up here in Canada. So the high pressure system will kind of be the main dominant force to steer Jose further north over the next few days into the weekend. So this is the initialization for Monday morning, and as we go forward in time, the trough that you saw earlier that was in Canada starts to kind of pick up Jose, kind of starts to influence Jose as we get into Wednesday early morning hours. So you still got this high pressure system still steering this thing around it, so you can see this clockwise flow around it. The main thing to take away is when does this trough come in to pick up Jose as well and weaken this high pressure ridge? That is going to be the main question. Again, we're still talking about 132 hours out. That's nearly 5 days, so there's still a lot of time to look at this and figure out what this thing is going to do. But the models have slowly begun to trend this thing further westward, and I'll show you that right now as the trend a little bit closer to home. So this is the GFS runs for the last few days, for the last, I should say, last 3 runs, I should say, there you go. The last 3 runs now of the GFS, so you can kind of see how the early runs on this thing, we're still keeping this thing further offshore, and this is for Monday afternoon. You can kind of see it was keeping this thing further offshore, but now the models have, especially the GFS, has started to push this thing further westward over time, and especially with the northeasterly part of the storm. This is on Wednesday morning. Again, you can kind of see this trend slowly pushing Jose, which will be a pretty decently strong about a mid-grade, low-grade hurricane at this time. But again, it'll be a much bigger system around this time as well. So again, trend is still with the Cape Hatteras area and up into the northeast. Again, the model has been slowly trending this thing further westward. And how much further west this thing begins to trend is still going to be the main question. Again, this is still 132 hours out, still 5-6 days away, so we still have plenty of time. This is again for the validation around 2 in the morning on Wednesday, so again, the trend is still keep taking this thing further west, but again, slight little changes in the model could shift this thing back eastward, or it could eventually push this thing even further westward. Again, the main dependent thing is going to be how strong this ridge is going to be, and how, if it pushes it a little bit further west as well. That's going to be the main question. And also this trough, how strong does that, when does it come in to kick out Jose as well, and to weaken this ridge. So there's still a lot of factors that are going to be in play that we're going to have to really keep a close eye on. I do want to show the height models on this again. High pressure, anything here in this, right here, this is the high pressure, so you can see rising heights, and anything in the brighter oranges, and the low pressure would be anything in the blues. So you can see high pressure is going to be the main steering flow with Jose, and you can again see this trough that goes up into Canada as we go into Monday and Tuesday. But again, it's when does this trough begin to dig in? So the GFS, for example, does not have a strong trough to kind of dig in, weaken this ridge, and kind of push Jose out the sea. So the high pressure in this case wins out and keeps this thing much further west and closer to the coast. Now, if we look at the same trend for the European, so you can see the same trough kind of digs in a little bit deeper and kind of keeps Jose just offshore a little bit more than the GFS. But again, it's when does this trough dig in and goes over this high pressure that's going to be building over the Michigan and Great Lakes region. When does this trough dig in, and how strong does it dig in, is going to be the main player, and how strong is the high pressure. Again, there's a lot of factors. We're still talking about something that's 120 hours out, so still 4 to 5 days, as I said. So we still have plenty of time to figure this thing out, but again, the trend has been shifting west, and that's the main key to take away from this, is that the models have been slowly trending this thing west with time. How much further west does it go? We'll have to see as we start looking at each run individually over the next several days into this weekend and into early next week. That's going to be the main key factor with Jose. I do want to quickly show that the jet stream pattern, this is way up in the atmosphere. This is 200 millibar level out, so this storm does have an outflow with it, with the jet streak of Canada, allowing this thing to breathe a little bit, because storms kind of struggle up in this part with the cooler waters around this time, as we lost a lot of the summer heating for the most part to allow really strong temperatures. So again, that streak that's up in Canada will allow this thing to breathe a little bit regardless of the temperature, so it will begin to deepen as it gets further north. So the current projection is for maybe a Category 2 hurricane right off the Carolina coast, but we've seen what happened with Sandy and Irene. Again, when you have a strong streak of winds up here allowing the outflow of the storm, you can allow these storms to deepen regardless of the temperatures, even if it's cooler water that usually doesn't sustain these storms. Again, that is the streak up here is going to be the main player that will allow this storm to deepen a little bit as it moves its way up the coast and kind of expand as well as it starts getting in the cooler waters. So the GFS right now, I quickly just want to show this again. This is one run of the GFS from this morning. It does show a 942 hurricane around this time, but the main player to take away from this is not so much the intensity of it, but just look at how big the system is going to be around this time. So anything pretty much in this lighter green section here is all going to be possible tropical storm force winds, but the key thing is as the storm begins to move north and gets bigger, again with that outflow pattern up to the north of Canada, the main thing that's going to be taken away from the storm is going to be the water push as this thing begins to move north into areas that which we've seen, especially with Sandy and stuff like that. When you have a very strong, even with nor'easters, I should say, even with nor'easters, this is a problem as well. When you get a very strong low pressure system off this part of the United States, you can pile in a lot of water into these sections and the sound up here on Long Island, and don't rule out the bay up here, up by Cape Cod and stuff like that. So as the storm begins to move further north, storm surges and waves are going to be the main player with this thing, regardless how close this thing gets to the coast. So this is still going to be a pretty interesting storm to watch as we go forward in time. Again, if the models keep shifting this thing further westward, impacts will start getting greater for anywhere from Atlantic City all the way up to Boston, even up towards Maine as this thing begins to get close to the United States. More cities get in play, and so you have more stronger impacts. And storm surge will get, again, further worse. But again, this is still the initialization for 132 hours out. This is Wednesday evening, so there's still plenty of time to watch this thing. I just want to show this as a reference to show that regardless of where the storm might be, the storm will get bigger, and you do have a very large wind field with this pushing water onto the east coast of the United States. So that will be the main player with Jose as we go forward in time. Again, if it trends west, then we'll get into more impacts. But currently, right now, waves and beach erosion and possible minor storm surge will be the main impacts as we go forward in time for right now, is the current thinking. Do you want to quickly show the ensemble model forecast for what they're thinking of doing with the what will be Hurricane Jose? Again, still a tropical storm right now, but right around this section here will re-strengthen into a low Category 1 hurricane. So the models for the European ensembles do want to keep this thing further off the coast, unlike the GFS, which wants to put it a little bit further towards the Cape Hatteras region. But again, the ensembles want to keep this thing further off the coast with the influence of that trough, weakening this high-pressure ridge here and digging it further south. So steering this thing, again, further out to sea. But again, if the models keep trending further west, we cannot rule out this thing having more stronger impacts, especially maybe even possibly a landfall up in Massachusetts, off the Cape Cod areas up there. We just don't know yet. Again, it's still very far out, still 5 days out. The models really don't do very good beyond 3 days. And I do want to show quickly what the National Hurricane Center is thinking with this storm. Again, 3 days out up till Sunday, pretty high confidence with the storm. But again, look at what the National Hurricane Center does with all that disagreeing with the GFS and the European and the ensembles as well. Really, really, really wide cone as we get into the 5-day area region. So anywhere possibly even from Cape Hatteras up here, all the way up the eastern seaboard, Atlantic City, all the way up to Cape Cod is still in play for possibly a landfall with this. Again, there's a lot of factors going into the storm. There's a lot of variables that everybody's going to have to keep an eye on with this thing. So it's not anything to panic over with. It's not anything to, evacuations or anything like that, obviously. But it is something that if you live anywhere on the East Coast, especially from Cape Hatteras all the way up to the Cape, especially into New York City and Boston, this thing is something that you definitely want to maybe be aware of, because we've seen storms that come up this track do a lot of damage with the coastal erosion and the surge, regardless of the intensity of the storms. Regardless of the storm intensity, we've seen what kind of craziness happens with these storms as they trek up the coast and these really unusual paths that they take. So we'll have to monitor Jose as we get forward in time, but as of right now, currently going to be a strong wave threat and rip current risk for the East Coast. As far as impacts and landfall, still way too far out, but as we start getting forward in time, possibly into the later part of the weekend, the models should have a better idea of what this thing is going to do as it gets further and closer up towards the northeast sector. So we'll keep an eye on it. Thanks for watching.